The Torah relates how Joshua blew a ram's horn to bring down the walls of Jericho and conquer its people. What then to make of the Israeli Defense Forces when its troops blew ram's horns before launching attacks in Gaza earlier this year? Combat-trained rabbis have now become an integral part of the Israeli Defense Forces. With news of the building of more Jewish settlements on occupied land today, you can imagine how all this goes down with Palestinians. Even among Israelis, there's concern that a supposedly secular military is now coming under the influence of messianic teachings. Katja Adler investigates.
Israel's army is changing. Once proudly secular, its combat units are now filled with those who believe Israel's wars are God's wars. There's a rising number of religious Jewish soldiers, and military rabbis are becoming more powerful. New regulations mean rabbis in Israel's army are now part of a military elite. They work closely with company commanders and are charged with boosting soldiers' morale. Rabbi cadets like these are trained here at officer school in ethics, religion, and warfare. Giving rabbis guns and influence in Israel's army is so controversial, we weren't allowed to film them train. We found these photos on the website for the military rabbis course. It's here the transformation takes place. Rabbis in Israel's army learn not just to defend the spirit of the soldiers of the Jewish state, but also the rules of engagement, how to go into battle alongside their soldiers. They have a weapon and use it if necessary. Rabbis with guns as officers of Israel's army. Critics say the worlds don't and shouldn't mix. Israel's invasion of Gaza earlier this year brought to light a number of disturbing questions about its army. Reports of excessive force, the abuse of civilians, and the wide-reaching influence of messianic messages.
It was the first time that the religious intervention was so intense. Inside the base, inside the barracks, with the rifle, we got a little book of Psalms, and I think it was a book of Kabbalah. All kind of biblical stories about wars between the good and the evil.
In times of war, Israel depends on reserve soldiers like Gal Einav to supplement its conscript army. But Gal, a non-religious Jew, told me in Gaza recently it seemed the spirit of the army had changed.
We were going to a battle, all geared up and walking, painted. And next to us going one civilian rabbi and our rabbi, the military rabbi, who is also an officer. It felt like we're going to a holy war, like on a crusade.
And it bothered you?
It bothered me, personally it bothered me. I think the two, religious and the military, should be separate completely.
But military rabbis welcome the changes.
Our job was to boost the fighting spirit of the soldiers, the eternal Jewish spirit from the Bible time to the coming of the Messiah. In previous wars, we, military rabbis, stayed far from the front. In Gaza, we had orders to accompany the fighters. Soldiers went to war after the whole battalion stood in a circle. We prayed, and then the commander asked me to blow the ram's horn, like when Joshua conquered the land of Israel. It makes the war holier.
Here, a military rabbi holds the final pep talk before this company enters Gaza. Something Israel's army is not keen for the world to see. The rabbi calls on God to make these men strong in his name. He tells the soldiers it's wartime, they must harden their hearts. They're about to enter Palestinian civilian areas. During the Gaza war, rabbis handed out hundreds of these religious pamphlets, calling Israeli soldiers the sons of light, Palestinians the sons of darkness. also comparing Palestinians to the Philistines, the bitter biblical enemy of the Jewish people. Israel's military has distanced itself from the leaflets, but they carry the army's official stamp. Israel's army insists its rabbis respect military ethics and put any private convictions aside. But in Gaza, that appears not to have been the case, according to soldiers' testimonies.
We had rabbis in this previous incursion who were saying you need to be cruel in this war. We had rabbis who were saying, and cruelty is not necessarily a bad thing. We had rabbis who were saying that the war is not only against the Palestinians in Gaza, but against Iran and against the Arab citizens of Israel. If a general would have said that, he would have been kicked out of the military. But suddenly if a rabbi says that everything is okay, that's very, very problematic.
Traditionally, Israel's military is secular, but it fights for a state that defined itself as Jewish. Motivational excursions for conscript soldiers in Israel have always included important Jewish sites, the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and here at Masada.
Masada is one of the most powerful Jewish historical sites you can visit. A 2,000-year-old symbol of resistance, and many here believe heroism in the face of a threat against the Jewish faith. It's also one of the main places that Israel's army takes soldiers as part of their educational, recreational facilities.
But look at these soldiers. You'll notice quite a few Orthodox Jewish conscripts. The number of ideologically driven religious nationalists is growing in Israel's military. They are joining combat units, while more liberal-minded Israelis are avoiding them. All this has made headline news in Israel. Is the country's military in danger of turning into God's army?
I believe it's more dangerous than people even think in Israel. The morals of the field, of the battlefield, the motivation to fight cannot come from a religious authority. Because once the motivation to fight comes from a religious authority, this is jihad. What is jihad? It's a holy war. If the rabbi goes to the soldiers, he turns it to be a holy war. And once it's holy war, there are no limits.